podcast, Daniel Nusky-Haynes. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. Thanks for having me back.
It's a lot of demand. The audience keeps reaching out saying,
there's,
where is Dan?
There's two people, I'll get him back.
So we've got to get him. Mate, what's been happening?
We've been just flat out. We rode through the
Busy.
winter. Yeah, rode through the winter, which was, quiet for a minute, and then it's just come back with a vengeance coming into July. About 15 minutes where I had a breather, and then straight back into it.
Had a jam-packed weekend last weekend.
Yeah.
Opens left and right, lots of activity still. So even though obviously there's a bit of media out there, there's still plenty going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, even the media doesn't. It seems to slow down some people, but the real people who still want to buy a house are still out there looking and looking hard.
Definitely. So we thought we'd jump on and do a new segment, Q&A with Dan. We'll think of a better name. Actually, We'll throw it out to the audience if you can think of a great name for Dan's little segment. But no, I think if we kind of look at today, when you buy a house, let's say you put an offer in, the offer's been accepted, what happens next?
What happens next? Then you
just move in?
Pretty much run in there and grab some keys and go.
Okay.
No, I guess from that point you it depends. If you're a first home buyer like I did, you have a moment of absolute panic that now you have a mortgage and what the hell happens now?
Yep.
Having been in that situation, you don't really know what to expect next. So I guess the key thing is obviously you just need to have hopefully open communication with your agent. It's probably a good place to start.
Yes.
And get some questions answered. And that being probably the main thing is just and also having a good conveyancer as well behind you is engaged as well, just to help you run through what a contract even looks like, what it is, make sure everything aligns to what you thought it was going to be. That's probably a pretty good place to start, because I know a lot of people can get unraveled with that kind of paperwork.
Yeah, because I think you go from scrolling apps, realestate.com, hopefully our website, even more, going to a few opens, maybe missing out on a few properties because you're offering and not successful, and then you get that phone call from that friendly agent Dan saying, hey, guess what, you bought a house.
Yeah.
And then it gets really quick.
It does.
So what happens from that moment? So obviously the offer has been in writing and that sort of thing, but obviously there's a contract. That in itself, particularly for your first home, that's huge.
Yeah, it's a full-on read, not an exciting read, but it's an important one. Yeah, about 15 pages of fun, but you need to just know what those numbers and things mean, the dates that are going to be in there.
Yep.
And once you have your understanding of that, obviously you then sign the contracts and you'll get presented with a Form 1. That moment, that is just...
You love Form 1s.
I love Form 1s, yeah, that's it. In a summary, it is everything everyone knows about the property.
Yep.
Everything you would need to know and everything you should, everything known in the past and going forward. That's just one big history book of the property.
And I mean, in some cases, if the property's strata titled or thereabout, it can be nearly 200 pages of information. I remember back in my day, but when I started pre-DocuSign digital, it was literally this printed Bible. Now, obviously, a lot of the time, and certainly in our business, we get a conveyancer to prepare the Form 1, but so as you say, it's got all the information they need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and once they get that one, then it's just that kicks off the cooling off period, a signed contract and a Form 1 served.
Yep.
Cooling off has begun, which is a 48-hour window or 2 full business day period that basically you have to walk away from the contract if you decide to for whatever reason.
Okay.
But those sort of things, especially in this market, the way it has been with people offering on multiple properties and things like that, that's just something we have to be wary of, even as agents or even as a buyer or a vendor needs to be just aware of that. If you're offering on multiple properties and have cooling off periods happening here and there, I know some agents would have experienced people pulling out of contracts because something else has been accepted.
Well, there's been a lot of anxiety, a lot of anxious buyers. But I guess if you're a buyer that you've been hit with a contract and then Form 1 shortly thereafterwards. I know something that we see a lot of buyers do, and something we encourage is for their conveyancer to have a look at it. And
absolutely.
That's really where your conveyancer, as you said before, if you engage them really early, they can actually kind of hold your hand through the process and explain it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, usually we get the Form 1s and contracts get looked over by a conveyancer, or the purchaser will get them to have a look on their behalf and just give them the thumbs up tick of approval. It's just good for them to know they've got someone in their corner and this is all good, it's legit, it's not written on a bar napkin and not something like that. So
there's nothing missing.
Yeah, nothing
all that
missing,
sort of
nothing
thing.
key that's going to slow down the going forward process.
Yeah, so and it would surprise some people that aren't familiar that it is only 2 business days in South Australia. Like I think, I might get this wrong, but in New South Wales, I think it's 5 business days, and Victoria it's slightly different again. Western Australia doesn't have a cooling off period, so Australia as a whole, like every state has different laws. So particularly we're getting a lot of interstate interest in our market, so it's worth them just reading up on what it is in South Australia.
Yeah, and people just asking, if they are from interstate, what's the cooling off situation, or if they assume they have 5 days but they've only got 2. Sometimes they're a bit baffled by that, and it happens a lot quicker than they might be used to. But that's just something you just coach them through.
Absolutely, and then the milestone after the cooling off period, obviously that's when the deposit's due and payable into the trust account, and at that point, it's essentially a done deal. Like if you're a seller watching this podcast, then that's when you know that, okay, the buyer is committed. For a buyer, that's when you're committing. You might have conditions on the contract, like you're building in pest or finance and those sorts of things, but that's when you're kind of locked in.
That's it. Yeah, at that point you're committed, and committed to the vendor to buy the property, and that's up to you then to try and follow through on your end of the contract. Contractually obligated. Don't know if I said that right, but we'll give it a go.
The gist was there. That's the
Look, I know what I meant. Daniel's words.
Yes, no, but exactly. Then you're contractually obligated to keep going. So, but obviously the cooling off period again for a buyer is not something to feel like they can't ask questions. Like we encourage any purchaser that this is the time. I mean, obviously prior to offering, of course, but also in that period, explain to vendors too. This is where we're going to probably get a lot of questions from our purchaser because they're just trying to dot I's and cross T's.
Yeah, that's it. Especially first home buyers. It's such a massive experience, and it's so much emotion and concern and excitement and all these things. You're just bouncing all over the place. So I guess our job is probably just to level them out a little bit, help them step by step. What's actually next? What's coming up? But what's important right now? And obviously answer all their questions and queries as they come in, because I remember in my situation, I just had no idea what I was doing. I was renting a house. It went up for sale. I basically accidentally bought it. It happened so fast. The next thing you know, I had a mortgage, and just that process was very, very traumatic in a good way, but traumatic in a good way because the results are obviously amazing at the end.
Yes.
But for someone who just didn't know what they were doing, it really just jumped in head first into a concrete pit because it was all just so fast. But hopefully as long as you've got a good relationship with your agent and the agent's open to answering those questions, it should be a pretty simple step-by-step process. Obviously, being in the industry now that
I was going to say,
I've done enough times.
That was a long time ago.
That was a very long time ago. That was very early 20s.
Buyers falling into properties now.
No, that doesn't happen so much nowadays. But 8, 9 odd years ago, it happens.
Yeah, but it got you started on your journey.
Yeah, it got me started. Yeah,
and it helps you then to relate to anyone, particularly if they're new to buying property or new to buying in our state and in our area. You can guide them through those steps, which is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love those calls when you get the first home buyers and they say, I've got their first home, and say, oh, cool, what happens next? Cool, no worries. First time, step 1.
I've got you.
Yeah, we got you. Let's do the first 2 steps, then we'll worry about the next bit.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point. I think where people come unstuck when they're buying a property is, or really this is probably a metaphor for life really, where they try and do 10 steps all at once, and it's like, look, let's just get through the milestones. So at the moment you've had your offer accepted, let's get the contract worked through together, let's get your Form 1 signed, or at least read through it, sign it when you're ready, then pay your deposit, then we'll talk through the next steps at that point. Once you've paid that deposit, that expression you said before, you feel like you're almost falling into ownership. It's because from there, it's like a roller coaster that gets faster because you might be subject to finance, you're waiting for loan approval. Eventually, loan's approved, you sign your loan documents, and then suddenly you're arranging key handover.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, next thing.
Pretty quick.
Yeah, it happens fast. Yeah, by the time you hit all those steps, sometimes it's almost a milestone every week. And then you get this, depending on your settlement time, you might have this sort of quiet period between settlement and your last condition of your contract, for example, and that's organisation time, which some people obviously excel at, and but I know some people. I was lucky; I was already in the house that I bought, but that does help. There's no real moving day. It was an easy moving day. But obviously, some people, they just need to be aware that on a settlement day as well is quite important. Settlement, while is booked in with conveyances, it's not always guaranteed. There's just that 1% chance that might not happen. So a big tip is book a removalist the day after.
Yeah, don't bank
a day. No, don't bank on it being that day, because settlement may not go through till 3, 4, 5 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
You don't want to be sitting there with a removalist sitting there in a truck all day.
I think that's where we see a lot of the stress. Like I think Murphy's Law is undefeated. We say it a lot, and random acts of real estate.
Yeah.
If it can happen, not being negative, we're very, very optimistic people at Nitschke, but we still know that there's things outside of our control.
Yeah.
When you're buying a property, sometimes you don't realise this, but as a purchaser, you've got your bank, you understand that, but the seller quite often has a mortgage, they've got to discharge if there's an issue there, and that's delayed by a day. So you're right. I think it's great advice. Make sure, if you're the seller, if you can move out before settlement, that gives you some time to get the house ready.
Yeah,
and then as a buyer, don't bank on getting the keys that day. If you can, amazing. You might get fish and chips on the carpet in the lounge room. How good. But try not to do it all at once. You've got hopefully many more years ahead of you in the house.
One day's not going to make a difference.
Definitely.
Take it easy and move in when the time's right instead of under that big pressure.
Great advice. Dan, appreciate you coming in for this pod just to cover off on what happens when your offer's accepted.
Yeah.
We'll catch you on another Q&A episode very soon.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks, mate.
See ya.